Natural disasters, a devastating global phenomenon that not only changes the lives of millions of people, but also leaves lasting scars on communities, economies, and ecosystems. From ferocious storms and devastating earthquakes to devastating floods and wildfires, these disasters cause people to face challenges beyond imagination. In today's video, we'll explore 10 of the world's most disaster-prone countries, learning about the unique challenges they face. However, these are not just dry statistics. We will bring you closer to emotional stories from survivors who have worked tirelessly to overcome difficulties. In today's video, we'll explore 10 of the world's most disaster-prone countries, learning about the unique challenges they face. However, these are not just dry statistics. We will bring you closer to emotional stories from survivors who have worked tirelessly to overcome difficulties. Join us on this journey to listen, learn, and understand more about how humans are resilient in the face of the unpredictable forces of nature. Japan's position along the Pacific Ring of Fire, one of the world's most tectonically active regions, places it at the forefront of natural disaster vulnerability. Earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, and typhoons are a constant threat, profoundly shaping the nation's history, culture, and infrastructure. Certain areas, such as Tohoku, Kanto, and Kyushu, face heightened risks due to their proximity to tectonic plate boundaries and active volcanoes. The Tohoku region has been particularly impacted, most notably by the Great East Japan earthquake of 2011, one of the most catastrophic disasters in Japan's history. This magnitude 9.0 earthquake unleashed a massive tsunami that claimed over 18,000 lives, devastated coastal towns, and triggered the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster, leaving a legacy of environmental and public health challenges. Other seismic events, such as the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923, which destroyed much of Tokyo and Yokohama and caused 140,000 fatalities, and the Kobe earthquake of 1995, which claimed over 6,000 lives, highlight the devastating impact of Japan's frequent earthquakes. In addition to seismic threats, typhoons regularly batter Japan, particularly during the June to October typhoon season. Regions such as Shikoku and Kyushu are particularly susceptible to the heavy rains, strong winds, and flooding that accompany these storms. The Ice Bay typhoon of 1959, Typhoon Vera, remains one of the deadliest, claiming over 5,000 lives and causing extensive destruction. Japan's 110 active volcanoes, including Mount Aso and Mount Unzen, also pose ongoing risks. The 1991 eruption of Mount Unzen demonstrated the dangers of volcanic activity, with deadly pyroclastic flows claiming dozens of lives and displacing thousands. Indonesia, an archipelago of over 17,000 islands, lies at the heart of the Pacific Ring of Fire, one of the most seismically and volcanically active regions in the world. This geographical position exposes the country to frequent earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions, making it one of the most disaster-prone nations globally. With over 130 active volcanoes, Indonesia holds the distinction of having more volcanoes than any other country, many of which have left an indelible mark on human history. The eruption of Mount Tambora in 1815 is one of the most significant volcanic events ever recorded. This catastrophic eruption ejected immense quantities of volcanic ash into the atmosphere, leading to the infamous Year Without a Summer in 1816. Crop failures, famine, and significant climate anomalies were felt worldwide, underscoring the global impact of Indonesia's geological activity. Another infamous disaster is the eruption of Krakatoa in 1883, which triggered massive tsunamis and killed over 36,000 people, while the explosion's sound was heard as far away as Australia and India. In addition to volcanic threats, Indonesia's position along tectonic plate boundaries makes it highly vulnerable to earthquakes and tsunamis. One of the most devastating events in recent history was the 2004 Sumatra earthquake and tsunami, triggered by a magnitude 9.1 earthquake off the coast of Sumatra. This disaster claimed over 230,000 lives across multiple countries, with Indonesia bearing the brunt of the destruction. Entire communities were obliterated, millions were displaced, and the long-term effects on livelihoods and ecosystems were profound. Certain regions in Indonesia are particularly prone to disasters. The Sunda Strait, home to active volcanoes like Anak Krakatoa, frequently experiences eruptions and tsunamis. The island of Sumatra, situated along the subduction zone between the Eurasian and Indo-Australian plates, is highly susceptible to powerful earthquakes. The island of Java, the most populous in Indonesia, faces regular volcanic activity, including eruptions from Mount Merapi, one of the most active volcanoes in the world. Meanwhile, the eastern islands, such as Sulawesi and the Maluku Islands, are prone to seismic activity and tsunamis due to their proximity to active tectonic zones. Indonesia also experiences a distinct seasonal pattern, with disasters often exacerbated during the rainy season, November to March. Heavy rainfall leads to frequent flooding and landslides, particularly in mountainous and densely populated areas. The Philippines, an archipelago of over 7,000 islands, is one of the most disaster-prone nations globally due to its location in the western Pacific Ocean, a region highly conducive to typhoons, earthquakes, and volcanic activity. Each year, the country faces an average of 20 typhoons, with around 5 to 10 making landfall, often causing widespread devastation. This relentless exposure to natural hazards significantly shapes the lives and livelihoods of millions of Filipinos. The Philippines' geographical positioning over warm ocean waters and in the path of prevailing winds creates the ideal conditions for typhoons. These storms bring heavy rainfall, strong winds, and storm surges, resulting in catastrophic consequences. Low-lying and coastal areas, such as those in Visayas, Mindanao, and Luzon, are especially vulnerable to flooding and storm surges, while mountainous regions like the Cordilleras often experience deadly landslides triggered by torrential rain. One of the most devastating typhoons in Philippine history is Typhoon Haiyan, Yolanda, in 2013, which claimed over 6,300 lives, displaced millions, and caused unprecedented destruction, particularly in Tacloban City and surrounding provinces. Haiyan's storm surge, akin to a tsunami, wiped out entire communities and highlighted the vulnerabilities of coastal settlements. Other notable typhoons include Typhoon Ondoy, Ketsana, in 2009, which caused massive flooding in Metro Manila, and Typhoon Ulysses, Vamco, in 2020, which left many regions submerged and struggling to recover. Aside from typhoons, the Philippines is also situated along the Pacific Ring of Fire, exposing it to frequent earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Significant events like the 1991 eruption of Mount Pinatubo demonstrate the wide-reaching impacts of volcanic activity, which led to global climate anomalies and massive displacement. Earthquakes, such as the 2013 Bohol earthquake, also inflict severe damage on infrastructure and communities. The socio-economic impacts of these disasters are profound. Entire communities often lose their homes, livelihoods, and access to essential services such as water, electricity, and healthcare. The agriculture sector, a cornerstone of the Philippine economy, is particularly vulnerable to typhoons and flooding, frequently resulting in crop failures, food shortages, and economic instability. Repeated disasters perpetuate cycles of poverty as families struggle to recover and rebuild in the aftermath. Despite these challenges, the Philippines has made significant strides in disaster risk reduction and management. The establishment of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, NDRRMC, has improved coordination during emergencies, while early warning systems and weather forecasting technologies have enhanced preparedness. Public education campaigns and community-based disaster management initiatives empower citizens to respond effectively to imminent threats. The adoption of adaptive farming techniques and resilient infrastructure projects also aim to mitigate the long-term impacts of disasters. Haiti, a small island nation in the Caribbean, is one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world, frequently facing the devastating impacts of earthquakes and hurricanes. Its geographical location along the Enriquillo Plantain-Garden fault line makes it highly vulnerable to seismic activity, while its position in the Atlantic hurricane belt exposes it to powerful storms that wreak havoc on lives and infrastructure. These recurring natural disasters, coupled with socio-economic challenges, have placed Haiti in a perpetual cycle of vulnerability and recovery. The 2010 earthquake is one of the most tragic events in Haiti's history, registering 7.0 on the Richter scale. This disaster claimed over 200,000 lives, injured countless others, and displaced millions. The capital, Port-au-Prince, bore the brunt of the destruction, with homes, schools, and hospitals reduced to rubble. Already weakened by decades of political instability, poverty, and fragile infrastructure, the country struggled to cope with the overwhelming scale of the disaster. In its aftermath, cholera outbreaks and a lack of access to clean water and medical care compounded the humanitarian crisis. Haiti's vulnerability extends beyond earthquakes. The country faces annual threats from hurricanes, particularly during the Atlantic hurricane season from June to November. Storms such as Hurricane Matthew in 2016 caused massive flooding, landslides, and destruction, leaving over 1,000 people dead and thousands more homeless. Coastal and rural areas, where infrastructure is sparse and agricultural livelihoods dominate, are particularly susceptible to these storms. Hurricanes exacerbate the existing challenges of deforestation, soil erosion, and food insecurity, creating long-term economic and environmental consequences. One of the key factors that heightens Haiti's susceptibility to disasters is its poor urban planning and inadequate construction practices. Many buildings are constructed without adherence to safety standards, making them highly vulnerable to collapse during earthquakes or hurricanes. The lack of resilient infrastructure in both urban and rural areas further hampers recovery efforts, as roads, communication networks, and essential services are often destroyed in disasters. Mexico's unique geographical position on the Pacific Ring of Fire and between two expansive coastlines exposes it to frequent and devastating natural disasters. Sitting at the convergence of the North American, Cocos, and Pacific tectonic plates, Mexico experiences significant seismic activity, while its proximity to both the Pacific Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico makes it vulnerable to powerful hurricanes. These recurring natural disasters have profoundly shaped the nation's history, infrastructure, and approach to disaster management. Earthquakes are a persistent threat in Mexico, with some of the most devastating events leaving indelible marks on the country. The 1985 Mexico City earthquake, measuring 8.1 on the Richter scale, remains one of the deadliest in its history, claiming thousands of lives and causing widespread destruction in the capital. This disaster highlighted the vulnerabilities of poorly constructed buildings and the need for robust emergency response systems. More recently, the 2017 Puebla earthquake struck central Mexico with a magnitude of 7.1, killing over 350 people and causing severe damage to homes, schools, and hospitals. Regions like Mexico City, with its soft lakebed soil that amplifies seismic waves, and Oaxaca and Guerrero, located near tectonic plate boundaries, are particularly susceptible to seismic devastation. In addition to earthquakes, hurricanes pose a significant threat, particularly to Mexico's Caribbean and Pacific coasts. The Atlantic hurricane season, spanning from June to November, brings storms that frequently impact the Yucatan Peninsula, while the Pacific coast faces its own share of powerful cyclones. One of the most destructive hurricanes in recent history was Hurricane Wilma in 2005, which unleashed torrential rains and strong winds on the Yucatan Peninsula, flooding tourist hubs like Cancun and displacing thousands. Similarly, Hurricane Patricia in 2015, one of the strongest hurricanes ever recorded, struck the Pacific coast with winds exceeding 200 miles per hour, causing widespread damage. Remarkably, timely evacuations and disaster preparedness measures helped minimize casualties. Mexico's vulnerability to natural disasters is further exacerbated by rapid urbanization, inadequate urban planning, and socioeconomic inequalities. In many regions, buildings fail to meet seismic safety standards, leaving communities exposed during earthquakes. Meanwhile, coastal regions, heavily reliant on tourism and fishing, often face significant economic disruptions caused by hurricanes. Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to flooding and cyclones, a reality shaped by its unique geographical and climatic factors. Situated on the delta of the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna rivers, the country's low-lying terrain makes it highly susceptible to seasonal monsoons and storm surges. Each year, torrential rains swell these rivers, often resulting in widespread flooding that disrupts livelihoods and damages critical infrastructure. Meanwhile, the Bay of Bengal frequently generates powerful cyclones, further amplifying the threats faced by this densely populated nation. Flooding is an annual challenge in Bangladesh, especially during the monsoon season from June to October. Regions like Sylhet, Rangpur, and Khulna are often inundated as river levels rise, submerging homes, agricultural lands, and roads. The floods of 1998 and 2007 were particularly devastating, affecting millions of people, displacing communities, and causing severe economic losses. In addition to riverine flooding, flash floods in hilly areas and urban flooding in cities like Dhaka exacerbate the challenges of water management and disaster response. Cyclones pose an equally significant threat, with the Bay of Bengal serving as a breeding ground for these deadly storms. Some of the most catastrophic cyclones in history have struck Bangladesh, including the 1970 Bola cyclone, which claimed over 300,000 lives, and Cyclone Cedar in 2007, which left nearly 4,000 people dead and caused widespread destruction. More recently, Cyclone Amphan in 2020 wreaked havoc, destroying homes, agricultural fields, and vital infrastructure, particularly in southern coastal districts like Satkhira and Bagherhat. The impact of climate change has intensified these disasters, making them more frequent and severe. Rising sea levels threaten to inundate coastal areas, while changing weather patterns result in unpredictable rainfall and stronger cyclones. Saltwater intrusion, caused by storm surges and rising seas, has further compromised agricultural productivity in fertile deltaic regions, endangering food security for millions. China, with its vast and geographically diverse landscape, is among the countries most affected by natural disasters, including earthquakes and floods. Its location along several active fault lines makes it highly vulnerable to seismic activity, while its extensive river systems, particularly the Yangtze River, frequently experience severe flooding. These recurring disasters pose significant challenges to the country's population and economy, prompting continuous efforts to enhance preparedness and resilience. Earthquakes are a persistent threat in China, with notable events leaving deep scars on the nation. The 2008 Sichuan earthquake, registering 7.9 on the Richter scale, was one of the most devastating in recent history, claiming over 87,000 lives and displacing millions. The quake caused widespread destruction, particularly in Wenchuan County, where schools, homes, and infrastructure were reduced to rubble. Earlier events, such as the 1976 Tangshan earthquake, which resulted in an estimated 240,000 deaths, further underscore the devastating impact of seismic activity. Regions like Sichuan, Yunnan, and Qinghai remain particularly vulnerable due to their proximity to major fault lines, such as the Longmenshan Fault. Flooding is another significant concern, particularly in the Yangtze River Basin, which is prone to seasonal inundations. The 1998 Yangtze River floods, among the worst in modern history, displaced millions, claimed over 4,000 lives, and caused extensive economic damage. These floods exposed weaknesses in flood management systems and prompted a comprehensive reevaluation of policies. China also faces frequent flooding in regions like the Yellow River Basin and along its southern coastline, exacerbated by monsoonal rains and typhoons. In recent decades, the impacts of climate change have intensified these natural disasters. Rising temperatures contribute to more erratic weather patterns, increasing the frequency and intensity of storms, floods, and droughts. The melting of glaciers in Tibet, which feed China's major rivers, further threatens long-term water security and increases the risk of glacial lake outburst floods in mountainous regions. India is a nation deeply influenced by its natural environment, with seasonal monsoons and earthquakes posing significant challenges to its population and economy. While the monsoon season, spanning from June to September, is vital for agriculture and water resources, it also brings devastating floods that disrupt livelihoods, displace communities, and strain infrastructure. Simultaneously, India's location at the convergence of the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates makes it highly vulnerable to earthquakes, particularly in the Himalayan region and surrounding areas. Monsoons play a dual role in India's landscape. They are essential for the country's agriculture, which employs nearly 50% of the workforce and sustains the rural economy. However, heavy rains often overwhelm river systems, such as the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Godavari, leading to severe floods. Low-lying regions like Assam, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and Kerala frequently bear the brunt of these inundations. The 2018 Kerala floods, for instance, caused massive destruction, displacing millions and damaging homes, roads, and farmlands. Similarly, the 2020 Bihar floods affected over 8 million people, highlighting the recurring nature of this threat. Flooding not only disrupts daily life, but also brings long-term socioeconomic repercussions. Crops are often destroyed, leading to food shortages and increased poverty in rural areas. Damage to infrastructure, such as roads and bridges, isolates communities and hinders recovery efforts. Vulnerable populations, particularly in informal settlements, are disproportionately affected, often losing their homes and livelihoods. Earthquakes, while less frequent than floods, pose a significant threat to India due to its tectonic activity. Regions like Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Kashmir, and the Northeast experience regular seismic activity, with urban centers such as Delhi and Kolkata also at risk due to their proximity to fault lines. The 2001 Gujarat earthquake remains one of the most devastating in the country's history, causing over 20,000 deaths and widespread destruction in the region of Bhuj. The 2015 Nepal earthquake, though centered in Nepal, inflicted significant damage in northern India, underscoring the cross-border risks posed by seismic events. Urbanization and unplanned construction further exacerbate earthquake vulnerabilities, particularly in densely populated cities. Older buildings, informal settlements, and lack of adherence to safety standards increase the risk of collapse during seismic events. In this video, we explore the experiences of countries regularly affected by natural disasters, from earthquakes and tsunamis in Japan to floods and cyclones in Bangladesh. Each country faces unique challenges created by geographical and climatic factors, reminding us of the importance of preparedness and resilience. In addition to understanding these weaknesses, we must recognize our shared responsibilities. Environmental protection is not just an option, but a necessity to reduce the frequency and severity of natural disasters. Furthermore, as countries face inevitable disasters, global solidarity becomes vital. By standing together, helping and learning from each other, we can build a safer and more compassionate world. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful stories. Take action today for a brighter tomorrow.